Life, a show about Jewish people and the books we read. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. In this November 2007 episode of our podcast, we celebrate good old-fashioned radio and the new media revolution that was born from it. We'll learn about the National Book Foundation's Literarian Award, presented this year to radio star Terry Gross, host of NPR's Fresh Air. We'll take a look at history with the book Radio and the Jews by David and Susan Siegel. Then we'll peek into the future at the Podcast and New Media Expo, where we'll meet literary blogger Marie Cloutier. The Book of Life is a monthly program, but this time we've got a bonus episode for you. Our Thanksgiving special will be posted online in the middle of November, so be sure to check back soon. You can find us at jewishbooks.blogspot.com or at our new, easier-to-remember address, bookoflifepodcast.com. Now, adjust your earbuds, stay tuned, and don't touch that dial.
This is Terry Gross, the host of Fresh Air.
And this is Heidi Estrin, host of The Book of Life. Now, don't get excited. I did not interview Terry Gross. But since she is my broadcasting hero and Jewish besides, I was thrilled to learn that she had won this year's Literarian Award from the National Book Foundation. I spoke to the National Book Foundation's executive director, Harold Augenbraum, to learn more about their selection of Terry Gross for this special recognition. Harold, the National Book Award includes a number of categories: fiction, non-fiction, poetry, children's books. You also have a few special award categories: a Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters and the Literarian Award for Outstanding Service to the Literary Community. Can you tell us more about the history and meaning of the Literarian Award?
That was started 3 years ago. The idea was to acknowledge somebody who was working in the field over a lifetime of service or a longer period of time, but was not necessarily an artist. The first one went to Lawrence Ferlinghetti, not for his writing, but for his work as the publisher of City Lights and the owner of City Lights Bookstore. Last year it went to Robert Silvers and Barbara Epstein of the New York Review of Books. The award is really meant for people who are not writers, but for people who exhibit a passionate interest in a way that moves literature and the reading of literature and the discussion of literature forward in the United States.
This year's Literarian Award is going to Terry Gross, host and executive producer of NPR's Fresh Air. How has Terry Gross's career reflected the values of the award?
In Fresh Air, by bringing the best authors in America onto her program, Terry Gross is able to expand the conversation about good literature in the United States in an intelligent way. A couple of million people will listen to Terry, and that means that they're thinking about literature and they're going to talk about literature, and they may go to take it out of the library or go to the bookstore and purchase it, and it makes literature more current than it would be without this kind of conversation that she has.
How did Terry Gross stand out as the most deserving candidate for this award?
You know, we're very pleased at being able to recognize Terry. You get the feeling that when you're listening to her interviewing a writer, that she not only has done her homework and read the writer's books, but she's also done her background research. And I think that that's very, very important because it's actually a conversation with the person that then creates a conversation with her public, so that it becomes more of a three-way conversation than anything else. And I think that that's something that's really to be recognized with her.
How do you think radio and its new media successors like podcasting support the literary world?
One of the things about radio and podcasting is that it's very focused on language. So it actually concentrates the mind on language itself. And I think that's what literature is. Obviously, literature is made up of language, but it focuses language in a different way from, let's say, television.
Harold Augenbraum, thanks so much for speaking with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
husband and wife team, David and Susan Siegel, co-wrote Radio and the Jews, the untold story of how radio influenced America's image of Jews from the 1920s to the 1950s. This book and CD combo is a scholarly and detailed examination of the positive and negative images of Jews broadcast during the golden age of radio. I spoke to David and Susan by phone at their home in New York. David, Susan, the subtitle of your book raises the question, how did radio influence America's image of Jews in the first half of the 20th century?
I think how it influenced people depended on what they listened to. Programs like The Rise of the Goldbergs was a very positive image, a very warm, lovable character and immigrant family, which is why it was so appealing.
That's true, but there were some people who didn't feel that way. The woman who, for example, said when she was asked what she thought about the Goldbergs.
Oh, she said, I wouldn't waste electricity on the Jews. And that's somebody who responded to a survey in the early 1940s on soap operas.
And yet, in the year 1928 and 1929, the two most popular programs on the radio featured ethnic characters, Amos and Andy at The Rise of the Goldbergs.
Then you would go to someone like Father Charles Coughlin, who broadcast throughout most of the 1930s, and he associated the Jews with the communists who were bad people, and so he talked about good Jews and bad Jews.
Tell us about some of the Jewish radio programs we've probably never heard of.
Well, we can start with one that I never heard of before we began this book. That's a program called Meyer the Buyer, created by a humorist and cartoonist named Harry Hirschfield, member of the famous Can You Top This team. He also had a comic strip called A.B. the Agent, and A.B. the Agent became Meyer the Buyer. Another one was Mama Bloom's Brood, which some people think was a takeoff on Molly Goldberg. The father and mother in Meyer the Buyer, the father and mother in Mama Bloom, the father and mother in the Goldbergs have the strong accent, the Yiddish dialect. The children in each one of those three programs speak like typical American young men and women. So you see the conflicts in the families in terms of trying to become Americanized.
Were there Jewish characters on non-Jewish shows?
Quite a few of them. There was a program called Kaltenmeyer's Kindergarten. Professor Kaltenmeyer had a thick German accent, and all of the characters in his kindergarten were of different ethnic groups. One of them was called Izzy Finkelstein, and he would talk to the professor about his father's clothing store.
Well, Jack Benny's program, he had two characters in the 30s. It was a Mr. Schlepperman who spoke with a Yiddish accent, and then in the 40s it was Mr. Kitzel, who was, if anyone was familiar at all with the Yiddish dialect, they just knew that it was a Jewish character, kind of a comic character who sold hot dogs with the pickle in the middle. There was a soap opera called Houseboat Hannah. The main characters were Irish, but one of their business partners was a Jew, Mr. Abe Finkelstein, who amazingly was selling lobsters for them.
Were there any interfaith radio programs?
Probably the most famous is a program that was based on a Broadway play. The Broadway play got the worst reviews in history at the time, and yet it became the longest-running Broadway play called A.B.'s Irish Rose. The story tells about A.B., who was involved in World War I, because the play took place in the 1920s, and he marries his nurse, who happened to be Irish. The two fathers-in-law don't know that their children have married out of their faith, and when they do find out, they become apoplectic. Very humorous, but also sometimes very controversial.
That's actually related to another question I wanted to ask. What kind of controversy may have been associated with radio portrayal of Jews, either good or bad?
1938 and 1939, the Columbia Broadcasting Company to put together a series of broadcasts that would salute the contributions to American society from various ethnic groups. One of the episodes was dealing with the Jews, and the issue was, should the Jews be treated differently? There was not going to be an episode dealing with Catholic Americans or Episcopalian Americans or Protestant Americans. Why the Jews?
The writers for the program felt strongly that there was a need for this because back in those days, Father Coughlin was listened to by millions of people, and so there's a lot of negative stereotyping of Jews on the radio. There was also the growing crisis in Europe. So they felt strongly, and they overruled the feelings of the American Jewish Committee that didn't want to air the program. A very prevalent attitude, at the time, shh, don't talk about us. Let's not bring attention to the Jews. In fact, when the Jewish Theological Seminary was considering creating the program, The Eternal Light, and the board of directors was deciding whether they should spend the money on the program, some board members had the very same feeling. Let's keep a low profile. Those people were overruled, and the program went on to be one of the most popular programs on radio, not just among Jews, but also among non-Jews. Continued not only on radio, but into television. The Eternal Light was considered a religious program, but it wasn't prayers or religious music or sermons. It was dramatizations, so that they would have the story of a 13th century Jewish community in China. And they would talk about the Black Plague. They had a program about Mahatma Gandhi.
Black Plague, who was blamed on the Jews.
Okay, and so there was a Jewish tie-in to many of the programs, but it was done as a dramatization, so it was very interesting to listen to.
One of their most popular programs dealt with the Warsaw Ghetto.
And that was done about 6 months after the actual uprising. So it talked about Judaism, but in a very subtle way, and it helped explain Judaism to the millions of non-Jewish listeners.
David and Susan Siegel, thanks so much for speaking with us.
The pleasure, I think, was ours. I know was ours.
And thank you very much, Heidi.
Hey, mister, 4 hot dogs, please.
Yes, sir. Pickle in the middle and the mustard on top, just the way you like him, and the whole red top. Good puppies coming up.
How much are they?
3 cents apiece.
3 cents?
Uh-huh.
Why do you sell them so cheap?
Taste them.
Oh, say, do they look? They do look like pretty tough weenies.
Tough. What suitcase handles they would make.
Well, they still look good to me. Give me 4.
What kind of mustard do you want on them?
What kind?
Well, I got strong, mild, and Christmas night.
Oh, mild, I guess.
Okay, here you are. 4 hot dogs covered with mild mustard.
Thanks. Gee, they're kind of messy. Haven't you got some rolls to put them in?
With rolls, it's 5 cents. With pickles, it's 10 cents. With relish, it's 15 cents. And with bicarbonate of soda, you couldn't afford it.
Well, just give me the roll.
Here you are.
Thank you.
Pickle in the middle and the mustard on top, just the way you like them, and the whole red.
This fall, I attended the 3rd annual Podcast and New Media Expo, a gathering for digital media creators. I met bloggers, videographers, and lots of other podcasters, covering every topic from psychology to politics to skydiving. I was particularly pleased to meet a fellow Judaica librarian. Marie Cloutier is a librarian and book review blogger. When we spoke, her blog was called Another Librarian's Book Blog, but she has since switched to the catchier name, The Boston Bibliophile. While the content is not strictly Jewish, it's a fun blog for book lovers. Check it out at bostonbibliophile.com. I'm here at the Podcast and New Media Expo in Ontario, California, and surprise, surprise, I found another librarian here. I'm sitting here with Marie Cloutier from Brookline, Massachusetts, and I was thrilled to meet another Judaica librarian of all things at this conference. So, Marie, what's your interest in podcasting and new media?
Well, I've been listening to podcasts for the last few years, and then my husband is a media lawyer specializing in First Amendment law, and then he also got interested in podcasting kind of through my interest in it, and he's here at the expo giving a talk on podcasting and law.
Do you have a podcast?
I don't have a podcast. I have a blog called anotherlibrarian.blogspot.com, which is basically book reviews and chit-chat about the book world and publishing and librarianship.
Who is your blog aimed at?
My blog is aimed at readers, not at librarians. I decided not to do yet another librarian blog aimed at librarians because I wanted to have a broader reach, and I figured some librarians would probably read it anyway.
Is there a certain genre that you focus on?
Mostly on general literary fiction, but sometimes it's just whatever crosses my desk. I did my first chick lit review the other day, but that's a new genre for me. I'm hoping to do some science fiction and fantasy also, but mostly I focus on literary fiction. This week, right now, it's September 29th, I'm doing a feature on Banned Book Week, which is a promotion that the American Library Association runs every year to highlight banned and challenged books and our continuing problems of censorship and the freedom to read. And I started today with a review of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which was first published in 1932. Every year I read a banned book just to participate in it in some way and to feel connected to it, and so I figured why not make that a part of my blog and make it a feature that people might be interested in.
That's cool. How often do you post?
I try to post every day, more likely 4 to 5 times a week.
It's ambitious.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. I certainly can't read 4 to 5 books every week, so I try to come up with other things to talk about. If I go somewhere and I go to a neat bookstore, I'll write about that. Just kind of whatever crosses my mind or crosses my desk.
Tell us a little bit about your library.
Well, right now I'm working as a library consultant / cataloger at a synagogue in Brookline, Massachusetts, Temple Ohabe Shalom. We have about 2,000 volumes that I'm in the process of cataloging and organizing. I'm working on the adult collection of the synagogue. The temple also has a very well-established children's library that supports the Hebrew school. But the adult collection is something that is kind of in a transition, and I'm helping to bring it up to the level of the children's collection.
Well, it was wonderful to meet you here, so good luck with your blog.
Thanks, and I wish you all the best with your podcast.
Don't forget to check back in mid-November for the Book of Life's Thanksgiving special at bookoflifepodcast.com. On that show, we'll be reading some of our listener emails. If you have something to tell us, email bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Post a comment on our website, or if your computer has a microphone, leave a 2-minute voice message by clicking on the voicemail link on our website. The Book of Life is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries, tending the Tree of Knowledge and promoting Jewish reading by supporting Jewish libraries and librarians. Visit them on the web at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band from Sacramento, California, whose CDs feature upbeat music from Ashkenazic and Sephardic traditions with Brazilian, Gypsy, and Celtic influences. Borrow their CDs at the Feldman Library or buy your own copies at freilachmakers.com. Fresh Air theme music was used by permission of WHYY-FM in Philadelphia. The piece is entitled Fresh Air, and it's performed by the Microscopic Septet. To download episodes of the Book of Life podcast, visit us on the web at bookoflifepodcast.com. Links to the books and CDs mentioned on the show are available on this website. You can also hear the latest episode by phone. Just call 916-313-3820. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.